Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast. BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. I've become a big fan of the true crime podcast, Crime After Crime, with Danielle Hallen and John Lorden, and they were telling a story on it about a Brinks security guard outside an armored vehicle that got sprayed in the face with pepper spray. And I thought this might have been something connected to Jason Derek Brown, who has been on the top of the FBI's most wanted list for ages. But it wasn't. It was actually a different but rather fascinating story in itself. Once again, the podcast on that one is Crime After Crime. And it only comes out once a month. They only do one episode a month. I wish they did it weekly or bi-weekly, but, I digress with that. Let's look at Jason Derek Brown, though, someone who has been on the run for the last 14 years. He committed his atrocity, his murder, this crime, during the weekend after Thanksgiving in November of 2004, and it's now November of 2018. We're approaching 14 years since Jason Derek Brown has been on the run, and it's an absolutely heinous crime. I mean, I'm not really going to sugarcoat it. It's a disgusting act. I mean, he shot, an innocent man in the head 5 times and stole $56,000 outside of a Dunbar armored security vehicle. He then went to a bicycle that had been stashed in an alley, and he pedaled away, essentially. He dumped the bike in some bushes that, a fair distance from the crime scene, and that was actually how they identified him as the alleged perpetrator, because of his fingerprints on the bicycle. No, I mean, that's a absolutely heinous thing, and a lot of people really try to focus in on Jason Derek Brown's lifestyle, about how lavish he was and how kind of outgoing he was, and just, how much he tried to be some sort of surfer dude, socialite. But no, he was a disgusting individual, and I really hope he's brought to justice, and he is apprehended. But we don't really know if that will ever happen. I'm hoping for it, though. When it comes to some things about this particular case, I was never an expert on it. I just always saw him on the FBI Top 10 Most Wanted list. Whenever I was checking out the FBI website, he was always there. And he's been there for the last, 12 to 14 years. And it just stands out. It's just what on earth is going on with that? One of the big things that they mentioned on Crime Watch Daily is just that they are flooded with tips. So many people are talking about this case, but, it's just they're just they have an avalanche of tips, as they said, so they can't really sort through all of them. Not to mention, they might not even be valid. He might not even be in the country. There's a big thing, though, to say is, how did he get away with this? This is not some massively sophisticated crime, no. He shot a man in the face outside of a movie theater, he took a bag with $56,000 in it, and he left on a bicycle. I'm not an expert on this one, and I had always thought in the past that he had stolen the armored vehicle. It's like he had stolen the Dunbar truck, and he drove the armored vehicle for a certain distance before he exited, just to put some distance between himself and the crime scene. But in reality, he left on a bicycle, and once again, not a very sophisticated crime, but it's how did he get away with it? Now, this is kind of sort of one of my kind of beliefs, so you have to take it like that. This isn't kind of an established fact. This is just what I believe happened. Some of the reports that came out from people who witnessed this said that they saw a Latino, a Hispanic male, as the perpetrator of the crime. And that's very important, because, of course, Jason Derek Brown is, basically what I want to say is, in the wanted poster that they put out, the very famous picture of him on the wanted poster, he is depicted as, a very light-skinned Caucasian male that almost has kind of like a Pauly D haircut from Jersey Shore. Well, what I really believe is, he doesn't actually look like that. And they were kind of putting out this image that, didn't resemble his appearance from 2004 to the present day, because there was a sighting of him in 2008, by someone who recognized him, and they kind of made eye contact while Jason Brown was driving in Utah, actually. And, like, he was stopped at a red light, and, like, he made eye contact with somebody who recognized him, and they both recognized each other, so he's like, oh, crap, and he just drove right through the red light. And that's been the last definitive sighting of him in 2008. And the person who saw him, the witness, has said that his complexion was much darker and his hair was much longer. Now, I think that's an enormous detail, because I really think that he looked that way back in 2004. Definitely the complexion thing, because how else could he be mistaken for a Latino, a Hispanic male? Basically, I'm trying to say that I believe he didn't look anything like the wanted poster. The picture that they used on the wanted poster was not an accurate representation of what he looked like back in 2004. So that's one of the reasons why he was probably able to avoid, being cited for so long. It's just they were looking for somebody totally different. And, one of the things, though, that I never once thought about was that he resembles the actor Sean Penn. They cited this on Wikipedia, and I was like, I have seen that wanted poster so many times. I never once thought he looked like the actor Sean Penn. And even one of Sean Penn's body doubles, like who was working on one of his films, was arrested, and questioned by the police. They're like, are you Jason Derek Brown? And he's just like, no, and he wasn't. But, it's like, they're sort of, put out this image of someone who looks like a light-skinned Paulie D, but in reality, they should have put out, the picture of a dark-skinned Sean Penn with long hair, and maybe they would have caught him before, they would have caught him earlier. I'm not even being silly with that. I'm not joking around. I genuinely think that is something that has impeded the investigation. Now, my first initial reaction with Jason Derek Brown was that he went to Mexico. Why do I say that? Well, that used to be, something that was much more popularized. Like, there are even films like Double Take or something where that's kind of the ambition of the film, to get to Mexico, and it's like, that was just my first thing. That's why I thought he had never been caught. I was like, he committed this horrible robbery. They're relatively close to the U.S.-Mexico border. He committed a robbery and a murder. He just fled the country, and that's why he was never caught. That was my personal instinct, like my first instinct. And there was also a credit card / bank card transaction that was used near the U.S.-Mexico border, so I was just like, he got out of the country. That's why he's never been caught. But, on Crime Watch Daily, they actually talked about that. They were like, he used his card near the border, and then his vehicle went north all the way to Oregon. And, it's like, the detectives aren't saying this. The FBI wasn't saying this. The interviewer working for Crime Watch Daily was kind of just the one who brought up the idea, like, oh, he wanted you guys to think that he was going into Mexico, but really he drove south, and then he just drove north to Oregon. And that's when that vehicle was last sighted. It's like, this is, there's a very big reason for this. For starters, people might be looking for someone who looked completely different than the wanted poster. Granted, though, by now, 2018, they have updated it with composite sketches with, like, an age progression, and also depicting him with long hair, and they have updated that to their benefit. But those are forensic, computer-generated, artist rendition images. That's not, a photograph or anything. Those things aren't, 100%. That's what they believe he looks like, as opposed to what he could actually look like. So, I think that was just a big thing that he did to throw off the investigators. And, before you criticize it, it seems to have worked. And it's like, they think that Jason Derek Brown can also blend in with crowds very easily, because basically, they're sort of saying that a lot of people on the West Coast would have a lot of the similar kind of features / fashion choices that, and it's just even the whole notion of blending in with crowds is one of the reasons why they believe he's never been caught. That, like, he's just kind of hiding in plain sight and blending in with a bunch of other individuals. They also believe he might be still frequenting Mormon churches around the country. He was, involved with the Mormon church, and he did a mission in France. And that was actually where he learned the French language. So I was always kind of wondering about that. And I believe on either the FBI, I think I was on the FBI website, they also mentioned the possibility that he could have gone to either France or Thailand. I don't know how they got that. I really don't know how they got to that level, because it's like, to that level of, precision. Well, what I can say about that is, a lot has changed in terms of international security over the last 14 years. Like, when we went to Canada in 2006, we used our university IDs, like our little college IDs. They were like, just give us something with a photo and your name on it. That's all they wanted. And we crossed the Canadian border and we entered back into America just like that, and it's like, no passport, no driver's license, no government ID of any kind. A lot has changed since 2014. So, it's like, since 2004. So, when we have things like when I go to China, I get fingerprinted. I mean, they also have lots of facial recognition technology. I mean, it's possible he could have left the country. It really is possible. And, like, entering Canada would have been very easy at the time. But, I'm not necessarily sure that's what happened. Not to mention, we do have the 2008 sighting in Utah, where, he was seen very definitively in the United States. So it's like, we know for somewhat that he definitely doesn't seem to want to, that wasn't his ambition, to leave the country and just never come back, which a lot of people, of course, would want to do. And another thing I've really thought about with Jason Derek Brown is he's probably committed an enormous amount of other crimes, just based on the descriptions of his criminal past before this, like being involved with things like fraud and, just deception and ripping people off. Also, as well as, the murder, the robbery. I really do believe he's committed a lot of other crimes that just have not been attached to him yet. He seems like a very destructive figure who just wants to fund his own selfishness and greed. But, he definitely did, create the impact of going to Mexico. Up until I saw that episode of Crime Watch Daily, I was, that's just kind of what people did. It was almost a cliche, and I mentioned many films and television shows talked about it or dramatized it, it was about, that's what you did when you committed a crime. You just crossed the border into Mexico. Of course, we have things like international law and, like, they can get a hold of you and you can get extradited, of course, and there are all sorts of things of that nature. Not all countries have the extradition treaty, though, such as Russia. I mean, that's one of the reasons why certain individuals couldn't be brought back from Russia to America for a trial. You can think of a few names. That's a different subject, so I didn't want to go off on a giant tangent. Now, when it comes to Jason Derek Brown, though, it's like, I really do have to insist that I believe that they were putting out this image of him that was not what he looked like. Like, he was either too light or maybe something was different about the hair. There were reports, that it was a Latino male who committed the shooting. That gives me the impression that his complexion was much darker at the time of the shooting. And even you have, in 2008, someone's giving that exact same statement. Okay, so for years, people were probably looking for someone who was, not matching the description of the individual on the wanted posters. I mean, I really do have to insist. I believe that is something that really impeded the investigation. Crime Watch Daily also brought up the possibility that, now he might be completely bald. They believe he might start shaving his head. I don't know why, but on some of the artist renditions that they were showing on Crime Watch Daily, they were showing that he could have possibly started shaving his head. Being cited in Utah in 2008, in Utah, I mean, there is the high chance that he's probably mingling with members of the Mormon Church. I mean, we also have to entertain the possibility, how much longer did he continue to live? Is he still alive? Did he meet an unfortunate demise? And that is why he was never found or cited in the last, I guess now it's been the last 10 years since he would have been cited. It's very possible. I mean, in a lot of these missing persons cases, granted he's a fugitive, not a missing person, but in a lot of missing persons cases, the person does sadly and unfortunately end up being found dead many years earlier. So it's like, we can always entertain that possibility that Jason Derek Brown has met an unfortunate demise. unfortunate only in the sense that he wouldn't be brought back to stand trial, for the murder that he committed and for all the other illegal activities associated with it. I do have to stress, though, very unsophisticated crime. I mean, he committed a murder and got away on a bicycle. The only thing that I would say that he kind of like, where he would have possibly fooled people would be, I really think the car transaction near the U.S.-Mexico border was intentional. It's, setting a false lead. Then he drives up north and ditches the vehicle. It's just like, I really have to stress that. I mean, that's the one thing that I thought that it might have been having some sort of ingenuity. I mean, that's like the one sort of thing that has any ingenuity in this whole thing. I mean, escaping from a murder, robbery, on a bicycle and just stashing it in the bushes, you really think he would have been caught a lot sooner. But once again, they're going off of, people reported a Latino man committing the crime, not Jason Derek Brown. And also, I mean, I really just, the description that they were putting out was probably inaccurate, and that slowed things down. Once again, for years, he probably looked like a dark, long-haired Sean Penn. Now, I mean, they think he's changing his appearance very frequently, and we do have to look at the possibility that he, left the country. Also, if someone is fluent in French, I just also thought of this thing off the top of my head. What if he went into Canada and tried to blend in with the French Canadians, and it's like, maybe he moved into Canada and moved, over toward Quebec or New Brunswick and somewhere in that area. I mean, it would be so easy for someone like him probably to blend in with a French Canadian population. I don't necessarily know if that's true, but that is just something that came to mind right away. I mean, like, once again, it was so easy to cross the Canadian border in 2006. Like, I want to say, though, that they did change the law in 2009 or 10. I want to say that it was 2009, because I remember, like, very definitively, like, we went to Canada rather frequently, because I used to live up near the U.S.-Canadian border, and they changed the law, which said you had to have a passport. That was around 2009 or 10. And, we have a sighting of him in 2008 in America. So, I mean, my little Canadian, Jason Derek Brown, French-Canadian, is, maybe that's not as likely as I thought it would have been, but it's very possible. I mean, it's not impossible, and it's definitely very plausible someone like him could, if, like, he got involved with some Canadian Mormons or something, that would definitely just, ça y est, as the French would say, like, that's it, it's just, like, taken care of, and it's just, I don't necessarily know that. That's just an idea that came to mind. The first time I've ever thought about that is while I've been talking through this recording. Now it's like, I really don't, I'm just very surprised, always, that this case went unsolved as long as it did. Because Jason Derek Brown does not seem like, the most brilliant criminal mastermind in the world. Once again, there's that one guy on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list who's always there because, Russia doesn't have an extradition treaty, talking about Semyon Mogilevich. And, he just lives freely in Russia because they can't extradite him. They sort of know what's up with that. Someone like Jason Derek Brown is like, avoiding capture for ages because they just can't pinpoint where he is. I get the feeling that the FBI knows a lot about his movements and his activities, and they're actively following him. And during the Crime Watch Daily episode, which aired 2 years ago, they're saying very definitively that over the weekend they had 5 new leads, about Jason Derek Brown. I always want to call him Jason Robert Brown, who was the musician and composer. He did the musical the last 5 years. I mean, it's been a struggle not to say Jason Robert Brown, but Jason Derek Brown, we're still talking about him. Yeah, Jason Robert Brown's an amazing musician, by the way. I digress once again. Now it's like, Jason Derek Brown, is just someone who does need to be brought to justice. I don't necessarily know how much the tips are helping. I think this might be solved more by forensics, or also maybe a confession, like, a lot of these people who are on the run, eventually they confess to somebody, and that person, ends up turning that information over, or absolutely, most definitively, genuine sightings. Like this person who knew him in the past that witnessed him in Utah, he could be somebody that could, a sighting like that would really be the sort of tipping point. That would be sort of how you would solve this case. Because, anybody could just look at someone who has a Pauly D haircut on the West Coast and be like, hey, that Caucasian guy is probably this Jason Derek Brown figure. I mean, I believe them when they're saying they get stuff like that all over the world. Plus, there is the possibility he went to either France or Thailand. But they also said, though, during the Crime Watch Daily episode, that there is no definitive proof that he ever used his passport or any of the known aliases that he used to buy a plane ticket, to go through the customs, to leave the country. No definitive proof that he has ever done that. So, I guess if we only look at the facts, we only have sightings of Brown in the United States. Even my little, cock-a-doodle theory that he's off in the Mormon circles of French Canada, yeah, okay, I mean, that was just something that came to mind, off the top of my head. No definitive proof that he has ever left the country. That's a big one. Didn't even go into Mexico. He drove down to the Arizona-U.S.-Mexico border and then straight back up to Oregon, throwing a false lead, which genuinely worked, mind you, and it's like, what is very likely is that he just tried to blend in to large groups in the United States, and they're really seem to concentrate on Utah. I don't know though. After 2008, and we had this definitive sighting of him in Utah. What would you do if that happened to you? Would you stay there, or would you be like, "Oh no, this is cutting it too close. I'm getting the heck out of here"? I mean, it depends on the personality type, I suppose. Because for someone like me, I mean, I would be like, there's no way you would catch me driving down the streets of Utah. You wouldn't catch me driving on the street at all. If I were on the run, I would be living in a tiny little log cabin in rural Montana or something like that, and I mean, that would just be me or something, like I'm a little bit, I'm less social. I'm certainly not a frequent nightclub attendee, and I'm definitely not kind of outgoing the way that Jason Derek Brown was. Outgoing in a bad way. I mean, he ripped people off for their money so he could spend it on like stuff like jet skis and an expensive car and stuff like that. I mean, that's definitely not that. But it's like, do you think that prompted him to drastically leave the state of Utah? Once again, I mean, to move to a place like in the United States, like so many places on the Canadian border, Maine, Vermont, all of those places where it would be very easy to blend in, with, and just pass yourself off as a French Canadian. And, it's like, that's something that, I never once thought of until just talking on this recording. Maybe something like that's more accurate. We have to look at the facts. No definitive proof that he left the country. Maybe he did gravitate more toward the East Coast after that 2008 sighting. Maybe he did gravitate toward something closer to the New England area. I mean, I know I sound like I'm grabbing at straws, but I really wanted to get the answers to why he was never captured. And first of all, there's the avalanche of tips that came in that they just couldn't sort through. Secondarily, he's changing his appearance very frequently. He's probably also committing other crimes. I doubt he's actually working any sort of legitimate job. Once again, the other ways to solve this case would be confessions, if he confesses to anyone, definitive sightings from people who knew him from the past, also fingerprints, if he's ever committed if there's any sort of, other crime associated with him and there are any fingerprints that are left behind. His fingerprints were already in the system before. That's how they got them off the bike. So I really hope that one day Jason Derek Brown is captured, brought to justice, and, he has to go through the trial for what he did, because, once again, there's no really glorification associated with this. It was a very heinous murder, and it's a disgusting thing for him to do. So says me, anyway. I mean, I hope he's brought to justice indeed. Well, that's all for me now. What do you think about Jason Derek Brown? And, what do you think happened to him? Moreover, what do you think about my little hypothesis that he gravitated toward Quebec and New Brunswick, the French part of Canada? Do you think there's anything credible about that at all? Please feel free to give any comments, theories, discussion points, anything. Please drop a comment below. Thank you so much for listening to this recording, and until next time.